Somewhere in your home, there is evidence of a person you are going to become. The guitar that got 3 months of obsessive practice and then went quiet. The language app you opened every day for 6 weeks and then didn't. The business idea with the half-built website. The sketchbook that's 3 pages full and 47 empty. The phase you were absolutely certain about. The one that felt different from the others. The one that was finally going to be the thing that stuck. That also eventually didn't. You have probably stopped telling people about new interests before they've barely started. Because you know how it looks. Because you have watched the same expression cross people's faces too many times. A slight, polite hesitation before they ask. So what happened to the last thing? And somewhere along the way you took their confusion and made it your verdict. Scattered, unable to commit. Starting things you never finish. A person who cannot decide what they want and so perpetually ends up with nothing. The jack of all trades, master of none. The cautionary tale about what happens when you refuse to just pick something and stay. You have been carrying that story for a long time. This is not that story. The world built a very specific template for what a successful life is supposed to look like. You find your thing early. You commit to it completely. You go deep, stay deep, and the depth rewards you with mastery. And the mastery rewards you with a life that makes sense in a straight line from beginning to end. That template was never built for you. Not because something is wrong with you. Because you are wired in a way the template was not designed to accommodate. And there is a profound difference between those two things. Because what looks like an inability to commit, from the outside, from the perspective of people whose minds work in straight lines, is something else entirely when you examine what is actually happening. Every time you went deep into something and moved on, you did not leave empty-handed. You took something with you, something invisible, something that doesn't show up on any resume or credential. Something that the person who stayed in one lane their entire life simply does not have access to. You have been building something. You just never had the language for what it was. Let's stay with what the experience actually feels like. Before the shame arrives, in the moment before the verdict. You encounter something new and something in you ignites. Not mild interest, not casual curiosity. Full ignition. The kind that reorganizes your schedule, occupies your thoughts in the shower, makes you want to tell everyone even though you know how it sounds. You go deep immediately, and the going deep feels like the most alive you have been in months. And for a while, everything is illuminated by it. Then something shifts, gradually, almost imperceptibly. The ignition becomes something lower, still warm but not burning. And somewhere at the edge of awareness, something else begins pulling, unrelated, illogical, making no sense given where you just were. And the pull wins. It always wins. And the guitar goes in the corner, and the sketchbook goes on the shelf, and the internal voice arrives with its familiar inventory of everything this proves about you. But here is what that voice never accounts for. What you absorbed in those months does not disappear when the interest cools. It goes somewhere inside you. It becomes part of the way you see things. A lens, a set of instincts, a cluster of connections that you now carry into every other domain you enter. The months with music gave you something about pattern and tension and release that has nothing to do with music and everything to do with how you understand almost everything else. The time with cooking was also time with improvisation and the chemistry of small variables producing wildly different outcomes. The season with martial arts was also a season with presence and pressure and what the body knows that the mind hasn't caught up to yet. None of it was wasted. None of it ended. It just changed form. This ranging quality, the way your attention moves across domains rather than drilling into one, almost certainly started early. You were probably the child who was interested in everything and therefore suspected of being serious about nothing. who moved between subjects and hobbies with an enthusiasm that adults around you interpreted as instability rather than intelligence, who was told in 100 direct and indirect ways that the way your mind moved was a problem that needed correcting. So you tried to correct it. You committed to things past the point where the genuine engagement had cooled, out of obligation, because leaving felt like proof of the thing they said about you. You forced yourself to stay in lanes that had stopped teaching you anything, because staying was what responsible, serious people did. And the resentment that built in those forced seasons, the deadness of continuing something your mind had already moved through, got attributed to you, to your restlessness, to your inability to appreciate what you had. It was never that. It was the cost of asking a ranging mind to be still. Here is what nobody told you about the world you're actually living in, the conditions that made specialization the safest strategy. Stable industries, predictable career paths, skills that remained relevant across decades. Those conditions no longer exist in the way they once did. The landscape changes faster than depth in a single direction can keep pace with. What was a competitive advantage 10 years ago is being automated or made irrelevant by forces that no amount of deepening in that one direction could have anticipated or prevented. The specialist built their entire identity around a single territory. When the territory shifts, they have nowhere to stand. You have been somewhere else every few years for your entire adult life. You have been collecting footholds in domains that have no obvious connection to each other. You have been building, without knowing you were building, a version of yourself that cannot be made obsolete by a single change in a single landscape, because you have never lived in a single landscape. The restlessness that felt like your greatest liability is also your most durable form of resilience. The shame that follows this kind of mind is not accidental. It was installed by a system that needed a specific kind of person, someone who would do one thing repeatedly, reliably, without asking too many questions about whether there was something more interesting over the next hill. Schools were designed to produce specialists. Career structures were built to reward them. The stories we tell about successful lives feature people who knew what they wanted early and never wavered. Everyone who didn't fit that shape was given a story about what was wrong with them. And because the story came from everywhere, teachers, parents, peers, the entire architecture of institutional life, most people who carry this quality internalized it completely. They stopped defending their ranging. They started apologizing for it. They made themselves smaller inside the template that was never built for them in the first place. What the system never offered was an alternative reading of the evidence, that a mind which ranges widely and synthesizes across domains is not a failed specialist. It is something rarer, something the specialist cannot become, no matter how long they stay in their lane. It is the only kind of mind that can stand at the intersection of two completely unrelated things and see what they have in common, and build something from that, seeing that neither domain could have produced alone. So what changes when you understand this? Not the ranging. The ranging is yours. It is the signature of how your mind works, and it is not a symptom to be treated or a tendency to be disciplined into something more linear. What changes is what the ranging means. When you stop reading the graveyard of interests as evidence of failure and start reading it as a record of genuine, deep, sequential engagement. When the guitar in the corner stops being proof that you quit and starts being proof that you learned what that season had to teach and moved on. Something fundamental shifts in how you occupy your own life. You stop waiting to become the person who finally commits to one thing. You start recognizing that you are already the person you are going to be, that the architecture was building the whole time, that what looked like disorder from the outside had its own coherence, seasonal, non-linear, invisible to anyone who wasn't living it from the inside. The people who have found peace with this kind of mind are not the ones who eventually learned to specialize. They are the ones who learned to trust the sequence, who stopped forcing themselves to stay in seasons that had already completed, who gave themselves permission to follow the next pull without treating the following as betrayal of the thing they were leaving. And what those people built across their seasons, that wide, strange, deeply personal architecture of a mind that has genuinely been many places, that is not something that can be replicated by someone who stayed in one place. That is entirely, specifically, unrepeatable theirs. You are never going to be just one thing, not because you lacked the discipline, because you were built with a quality of curiosity that one territory was never going to be able to contain. The people who stayed in their lane are not more serious than you. They are differently wired, and the world spent a long time holding their wiring up as the standard and asking you to explain the deviation. The guitar in the corner did not fail you. You did not fail it. That season ended the way seasons end, completely, having given what it had to give, leaving something behind in you that you carry now without noticing. You are allowed to be a mind that moves in seasons. You are allowed to go deep and complete and move on without owing anyone an explanation for the geography of where your curiosity has taken you. You're allowed to stop apologizing for the graveyard. It was never a graveyard. It was a map, not scattered, seasonally deep, not uncommitted, widely built, not a graveyard. A map of everywhere a restless mind has been. Before you go, I want to ask you something I genuinely mean. What is the interest you walked away from that you still think about? The one you called a failure, but that left something in you that never quite disappeared? Leave it in the comments. You might find that what you thought was abandoned is actually still alive in ways you haven't named yet.